Yep, I'm in Act 3. This is just me being me. I hope you'll see God's not through with us yet.
Hey everybody, welcome to Laughs, Lyrics, and Life Lessons. I'm Margot, and I'm glad to have you with me. I don't know, again, if you're new or if you've been staying with me, trying to figure out what is this woman all about, but this is the 7th podcast. And as we know, biblically, 7 means completion and perfection. Well, let me address perfection if you have a moment. I haven't been watching my podcast. I just felt like I did what I needed to do, and they went off to an editor. And of course, it's always encouraging when the editor says, I don't think she wants any close-ups of her face. Just what you want to hear. So I said, well, I guess the next time I broadcast, I'll be standing on the front porch looking in through the dining room window at this little bitty camera on this tripod. But that's okay. I don't know if you all, speaking of perfection, ever tried permanent makeup. I know this is an aside. I know I said I was going to talk about Elvis and all of that, but I have to get this out. Okay. I had friends who said, oh, you're going to love it. You'll never have to do your brows again and all this kind of stuff. And I went and didn't tell my husband I was doing it. And she did it. And if you've done it, you know it is not painless. And when you come out, you kind of go like that, but you go home because you're told it's going to get better. Well, I got home and my husband was eating and he looked up, he said, dear Lord, he said, you look like Groucho Marx. And I said, oh, now that's encouraging. I said, look, it's going to get a lot lighter. And I said, and I think it'll just kind of fade away. Well, the thing faded away. It chipped away till there was nothing left of that permanent brow. So I was left to my own devices. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I am left-handed. I've already explained that whole story of why I'm left-handed. Left-handed people, plus people who wear glasses, it's kind of a challenge to do brows or to do anything on your face. So I looked at podcast 6 to think about, now where did I leave off? And when I looked at it and I looked closely and I went, oh my law, above the rim of my eyeglass, it looked like a little brown teepee coming up from where should be my eyebrow. So I thought, so I couldn't see it. So when I took off my glasses, I thought I have made a wigwam teepee out of my eyebrow. And if anybody was looking at that carefully, they thought, what in the world? I know. Yeah, got a professional makeup artist and you're looking at her. Yeah, I'm available if you need any help. So then I've been having sinus issues. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but I am a meteorologist. Whenever we have a weather front here in Memphis, I can get a wooz and I can predict weather faster than they can on any of the networks. So with a wooz and with everything that came with it, my sweet husband said, you need to get a massage. It'll open up your head and do all this kind of stuff. I usually don't get massages, but I thought, all right, I said, I'll try it. Well, I went to this woman I'd never seen before. And she looked at me and she said, wow, she said, what are you, about 54? Well, I had to take Uber home because I gave her our car as a tip. No, I really didn't, but I thought, oh my law. And I came home and told my husband and he said, well, did you see her dog? And I said, what dog? He said, well, she was visually impaired, wasn't she? Yeah, I got one of those husbands, okay? Sweet darlings, sweet nothings, all that good stuff. So anywho, had that done. And now after I have told you all of this, I can talk to you a little bit about the Elvis story. Okay. I was teaching school. I was teaching little people how to read. And I would come home in the afternoon and I was still living with my mom who was by herself. And Linda called and she said, why don't you come to Graceland and I'll show you Graceland. Well, I just bought a 1972 Dodge Charger with the flip over headlights, if you all remember those. I thought that was the coolest car I'd ever seen. So I had gotten a cassette of Elvis live at Madison Square Garden, and I thought, I am really, going to impress people. So here I go, tooling over to Elvis's home. I pull up in the driveway. These people are standing around the gate, and they're going, she's going to try to get in. Well, my dear sweet friend had neglected to call the front gate to tell them I was coming. So I sat there, and they're looking at me, and I felt like such an idiot. So I backed that car out, and we didn't have phones back then in our cars. So I found a payphone, and I called Linda, and I said, little minor detail here. She said, oh gosh, she said, I'm so sorry. So I went back, and then she called at the front gate, and then the gates opened, and there I go. And that began the initial visit into the world of Graceland and Linda and Elvis. And it was a great 4 years. I've got stories to do about that, but I know my time is short. So let me continue with that saga about my adventures with her. So I hope you'll come back to podcast 8, and I promise the brows won't be sticking up like teepees. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
Yep, I'm in Act 3. This is just me being me. I hope you'll see God's not through with us. Yes.